I stood frozen at my father's funeral, feeling every judgmental stare burn through my simple black dress. 12 years of estrangement culminated in this moment of absolute isolation. Then my brother Thomas stepped forward, his voice cutting through the somber silence. "She's just here for the money." But Dad finally saw through her act. He's cut her off completely. The family erupted in muffled laughter, confirming what I'd always suspected: I was the outsider, the disappointment, the daughter who chose the wrong path. I clutched my hands together, fighting back tears, as the lawyer entered carrying nothing but a USB drive. No one expected what happened next. Dad's face suddenly appeared on the screen. Older than I remembered, but unmistakably him. The room fell silent as he spoke 3 words that changed everything. "The truth matters." The relationship between my father and me wasn't always strained. Growing up in Pittsburgh, Harold Anderson was my hero, a self-made businessman who built Anderson Manufacturing from a small metal fabrication shop into a respected regional company. When I was little, he would take me to his factory on Saturdays, letting me draw designs in his office while he worked. Sometimes, he would tape my colorful sketches next to engineering blueprints, telling his employees, "My Rose has an eye for beauty that we all could learn from." Mom was the peacekeeper in our family, always bridging the gap between Dad's practical business mind and my artistic sensibilities. When she was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer during my senior year of high school, our world collapsed. 3 months later, she was gone, leaving a hole in our family that nothing could fill. Thomas, 3 years my senior and already working alongside Dad, became the son our father leaned on. While I retreated into art as a way to process my grief, Thomas stepped into Mom's role as mediator. At least that's what I thought at the time. "Your mother would have wanted you to be practical," Rose, Dad said when I showed him my acceptance letter to the New York Academy of Art. "This family built something real. Something that lasts. Pictures don't put food on the table. But this is what I'm good at, Dad. This is what makes me feel alive." His face hardened in that way that reminded me of the times he negotiated with difficult suppliers. "I won't fund a fantasy. Either you study business at Carnegie Mellon, or you're on your own." Thomas stood in the doorway watching. "She's always been stubborn, Dad. Just like Mom." That comparison should have felt like a compliment, but something in Thomas's tone made it sound like an accusation. I left for New York the following week with nothing but savings from my summer jobs and a partial scholarship. The day I left, Dad stood in the driveway, arms crossed. "When you're ready to be practical, you know where to find us." Those were the last words he spoke directly to me for years. The first year was the hardest. I lived in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates, worked 2 jobs, and nearly collapsed from exhaustion most nights. But my painting started getting noticed in student exhibitions. I sent pictures of my work to Dad along with birthday and Christmas cards. The responses were always from Thomas, brief text messages saying Dad was too busy or not feeling well enough to respond. By my 3rd year, I stopped trying so hard. The gallery where I worked part-time gave me my first solo show, and I mailed an invitation to the family home. No one came. Or so I thought. My career slowly built over the next few years. Nothing spectacular, but I was supporting myself with my art and occasional teaching gigs. I tried calling on Dad's birthday last year, but Thomas answered saying Dad didn't want to speak to me. Then came the call 3 days after my 30th birthday. "Dad's dead." Thomas's voice was flat, emotionless. "Heart attack. Funeral's Saturday. No preamble. No how are you. Just the news delivered like a business update. I don't know what to say. Nothing to say. Just thought you should know." He paused. "Don't feel obligated to come. Everyone will understand." But I knew I had to go. Not for Thomas or the extended family who probably barely remembered me, but for the closure I needed. For the father I had loved, despite everything. I arrived in Pittsburgh on Friday afternoon. The family home in Shadyside looked exactly the same. A stately Victorian that had once felt warm, but now loomed over me like a mausoleum. Thomas answered the door in a crisp button-down shirt, not a hair out of place despite the circumstances. "You actually came." He didn't move to hug me or take my bag. He was my father too, Thomas. Inside, Thomas's wife, Amanda, gave me a cold once-over. We put you in the basement guest room. Your old bedroom is Jack's exercise space now. Jack, my teenage nephew, barely looked up from his phone when I entered the living room. Aunt Margaret, Dad's older sister, raised her eyebrows when she saw me, but quickly returned to her conversation with cousins I barely recognized. That night, unable to sleep in the sterile guest room, I wandered to Dad's study. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything was meticulously organized, just as he had always kept it. On his desk sat a photo. I didn't expect me at my high school graduation. Mom's smile beaming beside me, taken months before her diagnosis. I opened the desk drawer, finding folders labeled with years. Inside were newspaper clippings about local art exhibitions. Some had my name circled in pen. Looking for the valuables already, Thomas stood in the doorway, his face half hidden in shadow. I closed the drawer quickly. I couldn't sleep. This room is off limits. Mr. Patterson needs to inventory everything tomorrow after the funeral. He blocked the doorway until I left. Back in the basement, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if coming home had been a mistake. Morning light filtered through the small basement window, waking me after a fitful sleep. The funeral was set for 11 o'clock. I showered quickly and put on my only appropriate outfit, a simple black dress I'd bought years ago for gallery openings. Upstairs, the kitchen buzzed with relatives I barely recognized. Conversation halted when I entered. Amanda stood at the counter, arranging pastries on a silver tray. "There's coffee if you want some." Her tone suggested I should serve myself rather than wait for an offer. "Thanks," I murmured, reaching for a mug. "Interesting choice of dress," she added, eyeing my outfit. "Very artistic." I ignored the comment, pouring coffee with hands that trembled slightly. Cousin Sarah, who I remembered as being kind when we were children, approached. "Rose, it's been forever. I'm sorry about your dad." Before I could respond, Thomas entered in a perfectly tailored black suit. "The cars will be here in 20 minutes. Everyone ready?" From the corner, I overheard Aunt Margaret speaking in a stage whisper to another relative. "Harold was worth several million, you know. The business alone would fetch a good price if Thomas decides to sell." "Does she get anything?" the other woman asked, glancing my way. Margaret shrugged. "Thomas says Harold changed everything after that argument they had years ago. Cut her out completely." The funeral procession arrived at St. Matthew's Church, where Dad had attended services his entire life. The parking lot overflowed with luxury cars belonging to business associates and Pittsburgh's upper crust. People who had known my father as the successful businessman, not the dad who once built me a backyard easel. Inside, the church was packed. Thomas and Amanda greeted mourners at the entrance while I slipped in quietly. No one asked me to participate in the receiving line. As I walked toward a pew in the back, I noticed something unexpected in the community hall adjacent to the sanctuary. Through the open doors, I could see framed artwork on the walls, my artwork. 3 paintings from my high school portfolio hung alongside children's Sunday school projects and church event flyers. A wave of grief hit me. Dad had kept my paintings. He had put them somewhere people could see them. An older woman touched my elbow. "You must be Rose. Harold was so proud of those." Before I could ask what she meant, everyone was called to be seated. Thomas delivered a polished eulogy about Dad's business acumen and community leadership. He spoke of legacy and family tradition, emphasizing his own role in carrying forward the Anderson name. "My father believed in loyalty above all," Thomas said, his gaze sweeping across the congregation, but conspicuously avoiding me. "He believed that family meant standing together through difficult times, not abandoning responsibilities when things get hard." Several heads turned in my direction. When the service ended, attendees lined up to place white roses on the casket. I waited until most had finished before approaching with my own flower. Thomas intercepted me just steps from the casket. "That's enough of the grieving daughter act," he said, voice low but audible to those nearby. "Everyone knows you're just here for the money." I stared at him, stunned by the public confrontation. "That's not why I came." "Save it." His voice rose. "Dad figured you out a long time ago. Why do you think he changed his will? He's cut you off completely." The church fell silent as people turned to watch. "I don't care about the money, Thomas. I never did." Right. He laughed bitterly. That's why you show up after 12 years of nothing. After breaking his heart and abandoning this family. Tears welled in my eyes. You have no idea what you're talking about. Thomas. That's enough. A woman stepped forward from the crowd. Julia Carter. My best friend from high school who I'd lost touch with years ago. Stay out of this, Julia Thomas snapped. No, I won't. Julia stood beside me. This is a funeral, for God's sake. Thomas's face reddened. She made her choice years ago. She doesn't get to pretend she cares now. I placed my rose on the nearest pew and turned to leave humiliation burning through me. But something stopped me at the door. A voice in my head that sounded strangely like my mother's. Don't run from the truth. So I stayed sitting alone in my car until the procession to the cemetery ended and everyone returned to the house for the reception. Back at the family home, Julia found me hiding in the kitchen. I'm so sorry about Thomas, she said, giving me the first genuine hug I'd received since arriving. He's always been difficult, but this is beyond inappropriate. Thanks for stepping in, I replied. I didn't expect anyone to defend me. Julia squeezed my hand. There's more going on here than you know, Rose. Before she could elaborate, Amanda appeared in the doorway. Mr. Patterson has arrived for the reading of the will. Everyone's gathering in the living room. The formal living room rarely used when I was growing up was now filled with expectant family members. Thomas sat in Dad's favorite leather chair, already positioning himself as the head of the family. His son Jack slouched beside him, still glued to his phone. Mr. Patterson, Dad's attorney for as long as I could remember, entered carrying a laptop and a USB drive. No briefcase full of papers. No leather-bound documents. Thomas frowned. Where's the paperwork? Harold preferred a different approach, Mr. Patterson said, connecting his laptop to the large television mounted on the wall. He left specific instructions about how this should be handled. The room quieted as the attorney inserted the USB drive. Before we begin, Harold wanted me to make it clear that what you're about to see is legally binding and has been properly witnessed and notarized. Thomas leaned forward. Let's get on with it. Mr. Patterson pressed play, and suddenly Dad's face filled the screen. The room fell completely silent as my father's image appeared. He looked tired, older than when I'd last seen him, but his eyes held the same intensity I remembered from childhood. He sat at his desk, the same desk where I'd found my graduation photo the night before. If you're watching this, he began, then I'm gone. First, to my family and friends gathered, thank you for coming. I've never been one for long goodbyes, so I'll get to the point. Dad shifted in his chair, and I noticed how thin he looked. Had he been sick before the heart attack? Throughout my life, I've prided myself on being a good judge of character, he continued. I built a business by knowing who to trust. But I've recently discovered that I failed terribly at judging the character of someone very close to me. Thomas straightened in his chair, a smug expression forming. Rose, Dad said, looking directly at the camera as if he could see me. If you're there, I need to start with you. My heart froze. Was this where he would publicly disown me? I owe you an apology that's 12 years overdue. Dad's voice cracked slightly. I recently discovered something that has shaken me to my core. He reached off camera and held up a stack of envelopes bound with a rubber band. My handwriting was clearly visible on the top one. These are letters from my daughter. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, gallery invitations. Dozens of them spanning years. Letters I never saw until 3 months ago because they were intercepted and hidden from me. Gasps rippled through the room. All eyes turned to Thomas, whose face had drained of color. Rose wrote to me consistently for years, Dad continued. But I was told she never made any attempt to contact me. I was shown phone records of calls supposedly made to her that she never answered, calls that I now know were never placed. Dad pulled out another folder. When I discovered these hidden letters, I hired private investigators to look into other discrepancies I'd begun to notice. What they uncovered was far worse than I imagined. The screen changed to security camera footage showing Thomas in Dad's office late at night, removing documents from the safe. Thomas has been embezzling from Anderson Manufacturing for at least 5 years, Dad said as the footage played. The investigators found offshore accounts, falsified records, and approximately $2 million in missing funds. The room erupted. Aunt Margaret gasped loudly. Amanda covered her mouth, eyes wide. But that's not all. Dad's face returned to the screen. The money was used to support a second life Thomas has been maintaining in Tampa, Florida. The screen showed photos of Thomas with another woman and 2 young children outside a beachfront home. A second family, Dad said heavily. A common-law wife. 2 children. All while married to Amanda and presenting himself as the devoted son and husband here in Pittsburgh. Amanda stood up abruptly, swaying on her feet. This can't be true. I'm afraid there's documentation to prove every word, Mr. Patterson interjected, pausing the video. Bank records, property deeds, birth certificates. Thomas jumped up. This is slander. He was confused at the end, clearly not in his right mind. The evidence was independently verified, Mr. Patterson replied calmly. And as for Harold's mental state, he resumed the video. Dad held up a medical report. I've included my recent medical evaluations confirming I am of sound mind. Now I want to show you all something else. The screen displayed several of my letters open, so the contents were visible. Then photos appeared. Photos of me at gallery openings in New York, standing beside my artwork. Rose has built a life as a working artist against tremendous odds and without the financial support I should have provided, Dad said. What wounds me most deeply is knowing that while I believed she had abandoned this family, she was actually reaching out consistently, only to be deliberately shut out. The screen changed again to show social media posts and exhibition announcements with my name. My daughter never abandoned me. She was taken from me by someone I trusted implicitly. Dad's voice hardened. Thomas, if you're watching this, know that I discovered everything. The embezzlement, the lies about Rose, the second family, all of it. Thomas lunged toward Mr. Patterson. Turn this off now. The attorney stepped back, pressing something in his pocket. Immediately, 2 police officers entered from the hallway. Mr. Anderson was concerned there might be a disruption, one officer explained. He asked us to be present. This is private family business, Thomas sputtered. There are criminal matters involved, Mr. Patterson said. The evidence of embezzlement has already been provided to the authorities. On screen, Dad continued. As of 2 weeks ago, Thomas has been removed from all company accounts and positions. The board of directors has been briefed. All assets have been secured. Thomas made a move toward the door, but one officer blocked his path. Now as for my will, Dad said. Thomas John Anderson is hereby disinherited completely. He will receive nothing from my estate, and has already been removed from all business interests. Thomas's face contorted with rage. You can't do this. The estate, including all shares in Anderson Manufacturing, my personal holdings and properties, will transfer to my daughter Rose Elizabeth Anderson, Dad continued, with the exception of specific bequests to be outlined by Mr. Science. Patterson. I couldn't process what I was hearing. After years of believing Dad had written me off completely, I was now his sole heir. Rose Dad's voice softened. I hope you can forgive an old man's stubbornness and trust issues. I should have tried harder to reach you directly. I should have come to New York to see your work years ago. His eyes glistened with tears that mirrored my own. In my defense, I did try to make it right. I was planning to come see you when... He touched his chest briefly, when time ran out. Thomas suddenly broke free from the officer's watchful eye and lunged at the laptop, sending it crashing to the floor. The screen went black. That's enough, he shouted. This is all lies. The second officer quickly restrained him. Sir, you need to calm down. Mr. Patterson calmly retrieved the laptop. There are copies of everything, Thomas. This changes nothing. I want my attorney present, Thomas demanded. This won't stand. Your father anticipated a challenge, Mr. Patterson replied. That's why he recorded everything. The evidence against you is overwhelming. The officers conferred briefly, then approached Thomas. Thomas Anderson, we need you to come with us to answer some questions regarding the financial discrepancies mentioned. As they led my brother away, his furious gaze locked on me. This isn't over, Rose. Not by a long shot. The room exploded into chaos the moment they left. Amanda collapsed onto the sofa sobbing. Relatives whispered furiously among themselves. Jack stared after his father's shock evident on his young face, and I stood frozen in place trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. Julia appeared at my side, taking my hand. "Are you okay?" I shook my head, unable to form words. "Come with me," she said gently. "There's more you need to see." Julia led me upstairs past curious relatives and away from the commotion in the living room. She stopped at a door I didn't recognize, a converted linen closet at the end of the hallway that had always been used for storage. "Your dad wanted you to see this," she said, producing a key. The small room had been transformed into something unexpected. The walls were covered with framed newspaper clippings, exhibition announcements, and printed photos, all featuring my artwork or me at gallery openings. A collection of art magazines with pages marked by colored tabs sat on a small desk. On the shelves were what appeared to be small sculptures and paintings, my work professionally framed and displayed. "What is this?" I whispered, touching the nearest frame. "Your dad called it his rose room," Julia explained. "He started it about 5 years ago." I turned to her, confusion overwhelming me. "How do you know about this?" Julia's expression was apologetic. "After you left for New York, your dad would ask me about you whenever we ran into each other. At first it was just casual questions, but then he asked if I would keep him updated. You've been in contact with him all this time." The revelation stung. "Why didn't you tell me?" "He made me promise not to. He said he respected your independence and didn't want to interfere with your new life." She gestured to the clippings. "But he tracked everything you did. He subscribed to every art magazine and local New York paper that might mention your work." I sank onto the small chair, overwhelmed. "I don't understand. If he cared this much, why didn't he ever reach out?" "He tried," Julia said quietly. "Many times. But Thomas always intercepted. He told your dad that you wanted nothing to do with the family, that you rejected every attempt at reconciliation." A knock at the door interrupted us. Mr. Patterson stood there, his expression grave. "I apologize for the chaos downstairs," he said. "Rose, there's more you need to know." We followed him to Dad's study. Amanda sat there already, her eyes red from crying, clutching a stack of papers. "Amanda has been reviewing some of the evidence," Mr. Patterson explained. "She's found additional information that might be important for you to hear." Amanda looked up, her hostility from earlier completely gone. "I had no idea about the other family," she said, her voice hollow. "I knew Thomas was having affairs I'd suspected for years, but this..." She gestured to the papers. "A house in Florida, children who call him Daddy, a life completely separate from us." "I'm so sorry," I said, and meant it. "Don't be." Her laugh was bitter. "I should have left years ago. But what I really can't forgive is what he did to you and your father." She handed me a folder containing printed emails between Thomas and various people. The family accountant, Dad's doctors, even the household staff. "He systematically isolated your father," Amanda explained. "Especially after Harold's first heart attack 3 years ago. Thomas controlled who could see him, what mail he received, even what phone calls came through." Mr. Patterson opened his briefcase. "There's something else you should know, Rose. Your father was diagnosed with terminal cancer 6 months ago. The heart attack was unexpected, but he knew his time was limited." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Cancer. "No one told me he was sick." "No one knew except Thomas and the doctors," Mr. Patterson replied. "Harold wanted it that way. He was using the time he had left to put his affairs in order and investigate the discrepancies he'd begun to notice." "What discrepancies?" "Financial irregularities at first. Missing documents. But the turning point came when he discovered your letters by accident." Mr. Patterson handed me another folder. "Harold was having the attic insulated. The workers found a box of mail hidden under the floorboards, all correspondence from you that Thomas had intercepted. Inside the folder was a handwritten letter dated just 3 days before Dad's death, the day of my 30th birthday. "My dearest Rose," it began. "By the time you read this, I will have made things right. The lies that kept us apart have been uncovered. I've spent too many years believing the worst about you, and for that I can never fully atone. But I'm coming to New York next week. I want to see your work your life, and most importantly, you. It's time we healed this broken family. With all my love, Dad. A sob escaped me as I read the words he'd never had the chance to say in person. There's more, Julia said gently. She turned to Mr. Patterson. Should we show her the gallery photos now? The attorney nodded. Julia pulled out her phone and opened a photo album. Your dad didn't just follow your career from afar. He attended several of your exhibitions in New York over the past few years. The first photo showed my father standing at the back of a small gallery looking at one of my landscape series from 3 years ago. He wore a cap and kept his distance, Julia explained. He was afraid you'd be angry if you saw him, but he couldn't stay away completely. Photo after photo showed Dad at different galleries where my work had been displayed. Always at a distance. Always watching proudly. This was taken just last year, Julia said, showing me a final image. Dad stood before my largest painting, Motherless Daughter, a piece that had won a small but prestigious award. Aunt Margaret appeared in the doorway, her earlier coldness replaced with uncertainty. Rose, I owe you an apology, she said, stepping into the room. I suspected something wasn't right with Thomas for years, but I never spoke up. Harold would ask about you, and I'd hear Thomas telling him you wanted nothing to do with the family. It didn't match the Rose I remembered. But I stayed silent. Why? I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. Fear partly. Thomas has always had a way of making people uncomfortable when they question him. She twisted her hands nervously. And I suppose I wanted to believe the simpler story, that you had simply chosen a different path away from us. The truth is much uglier. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. There's one more thing you should know. Thomas actively sabotaged your college scholarship. What? Harold found evidence that Thomas intercepted a full scholarship offer from Carnegie Mellon's art program, a compromise that would have kept you in Pittsburgh while still pursuing art. Thomas destroyed the letter and told your father you had rejected it. The revelation was staggering. All those years of struggling, of working multiple jobs while trying to complete my degree, could have been avoided. A commotion downstairs interrupted our conversation. Jack appeared at the study door. His teenage face a mask of confusion and anger. Dad's back, he said. The police let him go for now, but they took his passport. He's downstairs yelling at everyone to get out. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I should talk to him. Mr. Patterson looked concerned. That might not be wise at this moment. No, I said firmly. It's time we had an honest conversation. 12 years overdue. I found Thomas in the kitchen, angrily pouring himself a large whiskey. The house had emptied considerably. Most of the extended family had made hasty exits after the will reading and Thomas's temporary detention. He looked up as I entered, his eyes narrowing. Come to gloat, little sister. No, I said quietly. I came to understand. Thomas laughed harshly. Understand what? How I've been screwed out of my birthright. How Dad lost his mind at the end and rewrote history. Why did you do it, Thomas? Why hide my letters? Why lie to Dad for all these years? He drained his glass in one swallow. You were always his favorite, you know. From the moment you were born. Little artistic Rose, who could do no wrong. That's not true, isn't it? When I brought home straight, as he nodded and said, good work. When you brought home C's, but had a new drawing, he'd praise your creativity for hours. The bitterness in his voice was palpable. When Mom died and you wanted to abandon the family business for your art dreams, I was the one who stepped up. I was the one who put my life on hold to help him through his grief. But still, all he talked about was how talented you were. I had no idea you felt that way, I said truthfully. Of course you didn't. You were too busy with your own life to notice anything else. Thomas poured another drink. When you left, he was devastated. He would sit in your room for hours. It was pathetic. So you decided to erase me. I decided to help him move on. Every time a letter came from you, he'd get depressed for weeks. It was better for everyone. If he believed you'd made a clean break, that wasn't your decision to make. Someone had to make decisions. Thomas slammed his glass down. Someone had to be the adult. While you were off playing with paintbrushes, I was saving the family business during the recession. I was the one who expanded our client base when the steel industry tanked. I deserved what was coming to me. And that justifies stealing from the company, having a second family. Thomas's face flushed. You don't know anything about my life. I know that you systematically destroyed my relationship with our father. I know that you stole my college scholarship opportunity. I know that you've been embezzling from the company for years. Alleged embezzlement, Thomas corrected with a smirk. Nothing's been proven in court. The evidence seems pretty overwhelming. Evidence can be disputed. Wills can be contested. This isn't over by a long shot, Rose. Amanda appeared in the doorway, Jack standing behind her. Actually, Thomas, I think it is over. Thomas turned. What are you talking about? I've spoken with my attorney, Amanda, said her voice steadier than I'd heard it all day. I'm filing for divorce immediately. Given the circumstances, I'm requesting full custody of Jack and an emergency order freezing your access to our joint assets. You can't do that. Thomas advanced toward her, but Jack stepped between them. Back off, Dad, the teenager said, his voice breaking slightly, but his stance firm. We know everything now. Thomas looked between them, seeming to deflate slightly. This is ridiculous. We can work this out. There's nothing to work out, Amanda replied. We're packing some things and staying at my sister's. The lawyers will handle the rest. Jack, son, you don't understand the full situation. Thomas tried. I understand enough. Jack's voice was cold. Does Sarah know her kids have a half-brother in Pittsburgh? Thomas flinched at the mention of his Florida family. We're leaving now, Amanda said. Rose, I'm sorry for how I treated you earlier. I was operating under a completely false understanding of the situation. It's okay, I said. None of us had the full picture. After they left, Thomas and I stood in uncomfortable silence. What happens now? I finally asked. Now Thomas laughed bitterly. Now I fight. I contest the will. I dispute the embezzlement charges. I drag this out until you're sick of dealing with it and settle. Is that really what you want? More conflict. More lies. What I want, he said, stepping closer, is what I've earned. 20 years of working alongside Dad while you were off playing artist. The business should be mine. The business is in trouble because of your actions, I countered. The employees might lose their jobs if this isn't resolved quickly. For the first time, something like doubt flickered across Thomas's face. The business will be fine. Will it? Mr. Patterson showed me the books. The missing money has created serious cash flow problems. There's a major client contract due next week that's in jeopardy because suppliers haven't been paid. Thomas moved to the window, looking out at the garden where we'd played as children. That's not my problem anymore, is it? You're the owner now. You figure it out. I intend to. I surprised myself with the firmness in my voice. Dad believed I could do this, and I won't let him down. Thomas turned back, studying me with new eyes. You know nothing about running a manufacturing business. You'll fail within 6 months. Maybe. But I'll fail honestly, which is more than I can say for you. His face hardened again. Get out of my house. It's not your house anymore. I reminded him gently. The deed transferred to me upon Dad's death. But I understand you need time to process everything. Take tonight to pack what you need. We can discuss next steps tomorrow. As I turned to leave, Thomas called after me, his voice suddenly vulnerable. He really kept track of your art all those years. I paused at the door. Yes. He had a whole room dedicated to it. Thomas nodded slowly, something unreadable crossing his face. He never came to see any of my achievements. Not once. For a moment I glimpsed the hurt little boy behind the angry man, the child who had always felt he was working twice as hard for half the recognition. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it helped me understand it a little better. I'm sorry if that's true, I said. But it doesn't justify what you did. No, he agreed quietly. I suppose it doesn't. That night I sat in Dad's study, surrounded by company documents, trying to make sense of the business I had unexpectedly inherited. The financials were worse than I'd initially thought. Thomas's embezzlement had left several key accounts underfunded. Suppliers were threatening to halt deliveries, The company's 300 employees might face layoffs if things didn't turn around quickly. A knock at the door interrupted my review. Mr. Patterson stood there holding a sealed envelope. Your father left instructions that this should be given to you if you accepted responsibility for the company, he said, handing me the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and a list of names and contact information. These are the people I trust most, Dad had written. They know the business inside and out, and they have the integrity Thomas lacks. Let them guide you while you find your footing. Your artist's eye sees patterns others miss. Trust it. You have more of me in you than you realize. At the bottom of the page, he'd added a postscript. The business was only ever a means to an end, to provide security for our family. Family is what matters, Rose. It's not too late to rebuild ours. I ran my fingers over his handwriting, wishing I could tell him I finally understood. Early the next morning, I stood outside the Anderson Manufacturing headquarters in the city's industrial district. The red brick building with its Art Deco facade had featured in so many childhood memories, but I'd never imagined entering it as the owner. Julia had agreed to accompany me, providing much-needed moral support. Ready for this? She asked, as we approached the entrance. Not even a little bit, I admitted. But it needs to be done. The receptionist's eyes widened when I introduced myself. Word of yesterday's dramatic will reading had clearly spread. Miss Anderson, we weren't expecting you. Should I call Mr. Thomas? No need, I said, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. Could you please gather the department heads for a meeting in 30 minutes? The executive floor was eerily quiet as I settled into my father's office. Awards and photographs lined the walls, a lifetime of business achievements documented in glass and metal and smiling faces. One by one, the management team filed in, their expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. I recognized some from my childhood visits, but most were strangers. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, I began. I know this is unexpected. Until yesterday, I had no idea I would be standing here. A silver-haired man in the back, Rick Jensen, the production manager, according to his nameplate, spoke up. With all due respect, Miss Anderson, rumors are flying. Is it true Thomas has been removed from the company? Yes. I confirmed. And I understand you all have questions and concerns. I'll be as transparent as possible. Over the next hour, I outlined what had happened, excluding the personal details but confirming the financial improprieties. I showed them the list of trusted employees Dad had left me, and announced my intention to form a transition team. I won't pretend to know this business like you all do, I said honestly. I'm an artist, not a manufacturer, but I care deeply about my father's legacy and the livelihoods of everyone who works here. I'm asking for your patience and expertise as we navigate this situation. The CFO, Barbara Wells, raised her hand. Miss Anderson, we have a serious cash flow problem. The Miller contract is due next week, and we're short on materials because suppliers haven't been paid. That's our top priority, I agreed. Mr. Patterson has freed up funds from my father's personal accounts to cover the immediate shortfall. I've authorized those transfers this morning. The tension in the room eased slightly. Rick Jensen spoke again. Thomas was here early this morning removing files from his office. He told several employees that this was a temporary situation and he'd be back in charge soon. I suppressed a sigh. I understand there will be loyalty conflicts, I acknowledged. All I ask is that you give me a chance to prove my commitment to this company and its people. As the meeting broke up, several managers lingered to speak with me privately. To my surprise, most seemed cautiously supportive, especially those on Dad's list of trusted employees. Barbara stayed behind until everyone else had left. Your father and I had several conversations about Thomas's financial decisions over the past year, she said quietly. Harold suspected something wasn't right but didn't have proof. I should have pushed harder for an audit. You couldn't have known the extent of it, I assured her. Maybe not, but I sensed something was off. She straightened her shoulders. I want you to know I'm on your side. This company means a lot to me, and I want to see it survive. I could use your help with something, I admitted. There's a project in the archives I'd like to locate something Dad mentioned in his papers about an arts initiative. Barbara's eyes lit up. The community design collaborative Harold started developing that concept about a year ago. He said it was inspired by you, actually. By me. He had this idea to partner with local artists to design custom pieces for public spaces, benches, light fixtures, decorative elements. He thought it would differentiate us from competitors who only focus on industrial components. She led me to a conference room where rolls of blueprints and design concepts covered a large table. He worked on this in his free time, Barbara explained. Said it combined the practical side of manufacturing with the beauty of artistic vision, bridging his world and yours. I unrolled one of the sketches, an elegant park bench, with integrated lighting, both functional and beautiful. Dad's precise engineering drawings were complemented by colorful artistic renderings that someone else had added. Who did the artistic components? I asked, tracing the fluid lines with my finger. Barbara smiled. Harold did. Said he was channeling his inner Rose. Tears pricked my eyes. All those years I thought he dismissed my artistic path, he'd been secretly nurturing his own creative side. The next week passed in a blur of meetings, legal consultations, and crash courses in manufacturing processes. Thomas made good on his threat to contest the will, filing preliminary paperwork with the court. But Mr. Patterson assured me the video evidence and documentation of Thomas's misconduct would make his case extremely difficult to win. The immediate crisis came with the Miller contract, a major order for custom-designed structural components for a new cultural center downtown. The materials had been secured thanks to the emergency funding, but the custom designs were behind schedule due to the disruption. We need a creative solution, Rick explained during our daily briefing. The standard components won't work with the architect's vision, and we don't have time to completely retool. I studied the blueprints, something clicking in my mind. What if we modified the existing design, rather than starting from scratch? Look at these connection points. If we adjust the angles here and here, we could create something that meets both the structural requirements and the aesthetic. Vision. Rick looked skeptical, but agreed to let me work with the design team. 3 days later, we presented the modified components to the Miller representatives. These are better than what we originally specified, the lead architect admitted, examining the prototypes. More elegant, but just as functional. How did you come up with this? I explained the design modifications and the manufacturing adaptations we'd made to accommodate them. You have an unusual perspective, Miss Anderson, she said. It's rare to find someone who understands both form and function so intuitively. As the Miller team left with the approved designs, I felt a weight lift. We'd saved the contract. More importantly, I'd found a way to contribute that leveraged my artistic background rather than trying to be something I wasn't. The positive outcome rippled through the company. Employees who had been wary began stopping by with ideas and questions. I established an open-door policy and made a point of walking the factory floor daily, learning names and processes. 2 weeks into my unexpected role, I found a folder on my desk labeled Anderson Arts Foundation. Inside was a draft proposal for a scholarship program supporting young artists pursuing practical applications of their work. Barbara poked her head into my office. Found that in your father's personal files. Thought you might want to see it. The proposal outlined a foundation that would provide financial support to art students interested in industrial design, architectural elements, and functional public art, exactly the intersection of art and manufacturing that Dad had been exploring. That evening, I drove to the cemetery with the proposal and a small painting I'd created of the factory building. At Dad's grave, I placed the painting against the headstone. I think I finally understand what you were trying to tell me all those years ago, I said quietly. You didn't want me to abandon art. You wanted me to see how it could connect to the real world, how beauty and function could coexist. I told him about saving the Miller contract and the employees' growing acceptance. I'm establishing the scholarship foundation you planned, I continued. And I'm converting part of the factory into a design studio where artists and engineers can collaborate. I'm calling it the Harold Anderson Innovation Center. As I stood to leave, I noticed Thomas standing a few rows away watching me. For a moment, our eyes met across the peaceful cemetery. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod before turning away. Later that week, Mr. Patterson called with unexpected news. Thomas has withdrawn his contest of the will, he said. and he's agreed to a settlement on the embezzlement charges, full restitution plus penalties, in exchange for a reduced sentence. What changed his mind, I asked, surprised. He didn't say. But the prosecutor mentioned he seemed concerned about the company's employees and the potential long-term damage a prolonged legal battle might cause. Perhaps there was still a shred of the brother I'd once known inside the man Thomas had become. 6 months passed, in what felt like both an instant and a lifetime. Autumn painted Pittsburgh in fiery colors. As I drove to the cemetery, a small portfolio tucked under my arm. So much had changed since that first visit after the funeral. Anderson Manufacturing had not only survived but was thriving under the new direction. The Community Design Collaborative had secured 3 major public arts contracts, bringing together local artists and our manufacturing capabilities to create functional art for the city. The Scholarship Foundation had awarded its first round of grants to promising students. I knelt at Dad's grave, now adorned with a simple but elegant headstone. "I brought you something," I said, opening the portfolio to reveal my newest painting, a vibrant depiction of the factory floor where artists and metalworkers collaborated side by side. "We're bridging worlds just like you wanted." A twig snapped behind me. I turned to find Jack Thomas's son standing awkwardly a few feet away. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to interrupt." "It's okay." I smiled, genuinely glad to see him. "How are you doing?" In the months since the funeral, Jack had begun visiting the factory occasionally. At 16, he was showing interest in both the business and artistic sides of the operation. "Mom wanted me to tell you we're coming to the open house next week," he said, referring to the public unveiling of our first completed public art installation, a series of interactive light sculptures for the riverfront park. "I'm glad." I stood brushing leaves from my knees. "Have you heard from your dad?" Thomas had taken a plea deal, receiving a reduced sentence of 18 months in a minimum security facility. The agreement included full restitution of the embezzled funds and required therapy and financial management courses. Jack nodded. "We visit every other weekend. He's different now. Less angry. He actually asked about you last time." "Oh," I tried to keep my voice neutral, though the information surprised me. "Yeah. He wanted to know if the arts program was working out." Jack scuffed his shoe against the ground. I showed him pictures of the prototypes. He said they were impressive. Coming from Thomas, this qualified as effusive praise. "I found some old sketches in my room." Jack continued, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. "Dad said I should show them to you." The drawings revealed a talent I hadn't known Jack possessed. Detailed mechanical components rendered with an artistic flair. "These are excellent," I said honestly. "Would you be interested in our summer internship program? It might be a good way to explore, if this is something you'd want to pursue." Jack's face brightened. "Really? That would be cool." We walked back to our cars together, discussing possibilities for his future involvement with the company. As we parted, he hesitated. "Aunt Rose's dad said something else I'm supposed to tell you. He said he's sorry. Not just for the money stuff, but for everything else." The simple message carried the weight of 12 years of deception and pain. "Thank you for telling me, Jack." Later that evening, Julia and her husband David joined me for dinner at the family home. I'd renovated parts of it, converting the formal spaces into more welcoming areas. Dad's rose room had been expanded into a proper home gallery, showcasing not only my work, but pieces from scholarship recipients and community artists. "The transformation of this place is amazing," Julia commented, sipping wine in the newly redesigned living room. "It feels like a completely different house." That was the goal, I admitted. Too many ghosts in the old configuration. David, who worked in architectural salvage, had helped source unique elements for the renovation. "Speaking of transformations, how's the Community Arts Center coming along?" The largest project I'd undertaken was converting part of the factory into a public arts and education center, providing space for artists to work alongside industrial designers. "We open next month," I said. "The first classes are already full." Julia smiled knowingly. "And how's Paul? Will he be at the opening?" Paul Griffin was the architect we'd worked with on the Miller contract. Our professional relationship had gradually evolved into something more personal over the past few months. "He wouldn't miss it," I confirmed, unable to suppress my own smile. "His firm is taking on 2 more collaborative projects with us next year." As the evening wound down, I found myself in Dad's study. Now my study looking at the photograph that had started everything, me at high school graduation with Mom beside me. I'd added another photo beside it, Dad standing proudly at one of my New York galleries, unaware he'd been photographed. I opened the journal I'd started keeping after finding Dad's letters, adding an entry about Jack's visit and Thomas's message. The journal had become my way of processing everything that had happened, the discovery of Dad's secret support, the revelation of Thomas's betrayal, and my unexpected journey into leading the family business while staying true to my artistic roots. Amanda had apologized profusely for her initial coldness, explaining that Thomas had systematically fed her lies about me for years. We'd developed a tentative friendship, finding common ground in our determination to help Jack navigate the aftermath of his father's choices. The business continued to evolve. While maintaining the core manufacturing operations that employed hundreds of local workers, we'd expanded into areas that blended industrial processes with artistic vision. The very intersection Dad had been exploring in his final months. I'd moved back to Pittsburgh permanently, but maintained my New York connections, occasionally traveling there for exhibitions and to teach masterclasses. The struggle between my artistic identity and my family legacy had transformed into something unexpected, a harmonious integration of both worlds. The Anderson Arts Foundation had become my passion project, providing opportunities for young artists to explore practical applications of their creativity. Dad's original concept had expanded to include apprenticeships, community workshops, and collaborative design initiatives. In my darkest moments during those years of estrangement, I could never have imagined this outcome, finding my way back to family while staying true to myself. The path had been painful, filled with betrayal and loss, but also with unexpected discoveries and new beginnings. Thomas would be released in a year. While I couldn't forget what he'd done, Jack's message had opened a door to the possibility of eventual reconciliation. Not an easy forgiveness that erased the past, but a cautious rebuilding that acknowledged both the harm done and the potential for change. I closed the journal and looked around the room that had once been my father's sanctuary and was now mine. The three words that had changed everything at the funeral still resonated. The truth matters. Dad had been right. The truth, however, painful, had ultimately set us all free. Free from deception, free from pretense, free to build something authentic from the ashes of what had been lost. The following week, standing before a crowd at the Riverfront Park, as we unveiled the first major public art installation from the Community Design Collaborative, I found myself thinking of both my parents. Mom, who had nurtured my creative spirit, and Dad, who had ultimately found a way to honor it while maintaining his practical values. The Anderson luminaries represent more than just functional art, I told the gathered crowd. They symbolize the marriage of beauty and purpose, of creativity and practicality. They light our paths while reminding us to look up and wonder. As the sculptures illuminated for the first time, casting intricate patterns across the gathering dusk, I felt a sense of completion. Not an ending, but a circle returning to my roots while moving forward into something new. Later, as guests mingled and admired the installation, Paul found me gazing out over the river. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, offering me a glass of champagne. "I was just thinking about journeys," I said. "How sometimes the long way around is actually the right path." He followed my gaze to where Jack was enthusiastically explaining the mechanical aspects of the sculptures to a group of young people. "Your nephew has your father's technical mind and your artistic eye," Paul observed. "An interesting combination. The best of both worlds," I agreed. Something I think Dad understood better than I gave him credit for. As the stars emerged above us and the sculptures cast their dancing light across the water, I raised my glass in a silent toast to second chances, unexpected paths, and the healing power of truth. What about you? Have you ever experienced a moment when painful truth ultimately led to healing? Or discovered something about a family member that changed your perspective entirely? Comment below with your thoughts. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of transformation and redemption. Share with someone who might need reminding that even the deepest family wounds can sometimes find healing in unexpected ways. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I wish you courage in facing your own truths.